The following video contains language that may be inappropriate for young viewers. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Welcome to Behind the Bars, where we bring the unseen and the unheard stories from the depths of the prison system to the forefront. I'm your host, Jason Boss, and together we'll explore the madness, the chaos, and the harsh realities hidden behind the steel doors of prisons worldwide. From the local jailhouse to death row across the world, we'll show you the isolation, the seclusion, and the decades spent enduring unimaginable conditions. These are the stories of survival, struggle, and humanity in places most of us will never see. We're here to shine a light on what society often forgets, the voices of the incarcerated. Each story is real, each voice is authentic, and every moment reveals the raw, unfiltered truth of life behind the bars. Join me for a journey like no other, a journey into the darkness, the truth, and the resilience of the human spirit. This is Behind the Bars, real life, real stories.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends and family, thank you so much. You are on the record, and my name is Jason Boss. This is Behind the Bars, and I have with us today a very amazing interview with a very good brother, and this brother has been doing a tremendous amount of time in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. He's over 25 years on death row. And it is my honor, it is my privilege to introduce to you Charles Mamou Jr., who goes by Chucky. And my brother, my friend, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, brother. Thanks for the intro. How you doing?
Man, I'm good, man. Every time I get on the horn with you, I am good. I really enjoy talking to you, and you're one of my favorite folks, and I write a lot of folks in all prisons all across the U.S., and you are on my top number one of my favorite buddies. And so thank you very much for everybody out there that has not seen the very first podcast. I will link the first podcast up in the upper left-hand corner or right-hand corner. You guys can watch that right now. Also in the description below, you guys can write Charles Mamou Jr. I have two different ways that you guys can write him, one through the snail mail and also one through Securus. I'm sure he would love to have somebody reach out to him from these podcasts. So, guys, please look into it and see if you guys need any help on the setup. Let me know. I will be happy to help you out through the Securus side. My brother, my friend, we just got done talking. The last podcast took us through your childhood. It took us through a childhood that you described as a good childhood for what would be kids knowing of a good childhood. And now we're getting to a point that you have referenced a couple different times in the first interview, was the year 1988. And you said everything was good up until the year of 1998. So let's begin right there. What happened? Where were you at? What's the scoop of that year?
Well, betrayal is the perfect Shakespeare theatrical, right? Because you had the government betrayal. You know, of course, for you history buffs, we all know about the CIA's involvement with the drug trafficking process that entered this country. You had innocence lost because, as I described in the first episode, the community I grew up in was close-knit. People didn't sleep with their doors open, but then 1988 came, and crack cocaine exploded on the scene. And, you know, there's arguments about, man, look, drugs always been around. That's true. But the reason why we're still talking about the crack cocaine epidemic in 2025 is because it changed the perspective of people's safety net. Regardless of the high, the non-high, the safety of it, you know, today they got all kinds of people I don't even know what they're smoking today, man. It's potpourri, it's all kind of crazy stuff. But in 1998, people's innocence was aroused, man, and part of it was based on the government's betrayal. CIA trafficking drugs into the country, and Oliver North testifying against Congress that, hey, this was supposed to support the war. And now you got countless movies all describing it from different angles and whatever, but it doesn't matter who's telling the story unfolded. That's all that matters. And my community, we went from sleeping with doors open to now you're knocking your doors because it's all walks of life. I mean, teachers, doctors, chief of police, everybody. It was just so crazy, man. You'll never have an era like that again because everything was turned upside down. I tell you what, for all you comic book fans, there's Superman, but then there's a character called Bizarro who comes from a world where everything was flipped upside down. And that's the best example I can give you of how crack cocaine destroyed my community.
Okay, and we're talking 1988, right?
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Continue on.
And so in 1998,
98?
14 years old.
Okay. 98 or 88?
I mean, 88.
Okay.
No. Okay. Brother. 1988, I would have been right about 14 years old.
Okay.
And my mom, well, let me fast forward about 2 years before. So my mom, because I was raised by women, she kind of, in her mind at least, thought that I had some non-manly traits. I'm washing clothes, I'm washing dishes, fixing beds. And I mean, I'm surrounded by women, right? So I'm doing, when in Rome, you do what Romans do. So, but she didn't want that. She wanted me to be more of the masculine type of young boy. So she paid my uncle, who at this time was in his late 20s, to teach me how to box. And this fool had he had two pissy mattresses that he had put outside, and he had ropes around the mattresses. He made a real ring, man. And at this time, man, I'm only like maybe 12 years old, and his grown-ass man, he would buy some gloves from Walmart or whatever store he was, and he punched me one time and knocked me off my feet, and I took off running. So that was my thing. And so she wanted me to teach me how to play basketball, and I had 2 left feet at the time. But something did unique happen that year. My grandmother, my father's mom, she got cable TV. She was one of the first black people in our town to be able to afford cable TV. And since she was the only one that I knew that had cable TV, nobody black that I knew had cable. I spent most of my time there. And, of course, the explosion of ESPN Sports Center came on. And I remember watching college basketball. You had Derek Coleman, Malik Cycli. You had Alonzo Mourning, Georgetown. You had the Syracuse. You had St. John's. You had all these different rivalry games, and I became enormed with watching it, and I mimicked what I saw. So that summer I went to Houston, and, like we always did every summer, but some older guys kind of bullied me on the basketball court, and I had a choice. Either you're going to get up and fight and play, or you're going to be a sissy about it. So I got up and fought. But it made me strong. So when I returned back to Louisiana,
hold on. It said it made you what?
Stronger.
Oh, stronger. Okay.
Yeah, and I adapted to the game where I felt like I want this because everybody else said I couldn't have it. Well, yeah, I want it now, right? So when I returned back to Louisiana, I'm dunking on people. I went from within 2 months of having 2 left feet to being the guy who actually could dunk on anybody. And I started practicing my shot. We didn't have a basketball goal, but we had a neighbor who did. So from 6 a.m. until my mama came with the belt looking for me about 7 p.m. at night, Monday through Sunday, I was at my neighbor's house playing by myself because they didn't have a child. They had a goal. They just didn't have children. And they didn't mind. but that's where I crafted my skills. So when I was about 14 years old, my dad came back into my life. Not a typical father-son relationship, but when I say came back into my life, I saw him. And he came down in a BMW at the time, and he had all these big chains on and jewelry, and people who was literally worshiping the ground he was walking on, and it was totally a total contrast from the guy that I remember leaving in Houston with my parents' divorce, but he was a drug dealer. And I remember the disdain and hatred I had because I was part of at this point in school, I was part of the DARE program, man. I wanted to be like typical kids. Either I wanted to be a firefighter, police officer, or a preacher. And because in my mind, I had circumvented the idea that these three professions actually can make a difference in somebody's life and help. And that's all I wanted to do. And so here comes my dad, boom, totally opposite of what I wanted to become, but there was always a longing, regardless if it was a big one or not, of me wanting to become a son. You know, I was a son to my mother, but I wasn't a son to my father because my father was absent. And I didn't have daddy issues, but I just felt like that was the piece of the puzzle that was missing. And he kept coming down every weekend. I didn't know what he was doing. This dude would pull out, he had a briefcase, man, with so much money in it. I've never seen it like that. You know, this back like in '88, you know, you could buy a 2-piece chicken, a link of Buddha, a jungle juice for $3. You know what I mean? And so, but this cat riding around with 50 grand in the suitcase, in his briefcase. He wearing a gold chain that's worth at least 10, 15 grand. Rolex, I mean everything, right? And I remember one time I came to him because I really got good in basketball, and I was playing AAU ball for Louisiana Stars at the time, and I went from 8th grade to playing varsity basketball, which was a huge honor, especially on the Sunset High School basketball team, because we had a legendary coach, Francis Singleton. If he's not in the High School Hall of Fame of Louisiana, shame on Louisiana, because this dude never had a losing record. And but we had some amazing players, bro, that was actually drafted to the NBA, but you know, drugs, of course, in the real, a lot of campaigns, but still, we had always a great team. And I met Andrew Toney, who played for the 76ers, Philadelphia 76ers, and won the championship with Dr. J. And I wore his jersey number, the number 22, and he was supposed to get his number retired at Sunset High School that year. But he watched me play, and he came meet me on the court. I don't know who this dude is. I wasn't into watching basketball if it wasn't Michael Jordan, you know. And he introduced to me, and Coach Singleton comes over and hugs the guy and says, "Hey, man, this is Andrew Toney. He won the NBA championship." I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." And he says, "Well, you know, I came here to retire my number, but after seeing you wear it, I want you to keep that number." After I saw you, I'll never forget, and that was a huge honor. But I knew I had talent. I knew I could have made it a lot, but I was.
What number was that?
This is when peer pressure. 22.
22.
The number 22, yeah. And but at this point, I kind of hung out with the wrong crowd. You know, it was a little bit older crowd, and I started drinking, 40-ounce Old Milwaukee beer and Schlitz malt liquor, just trying to be cool. And at this point, because I was on this basketball team, girls started coming in my life, and that just confused shit even more. And but my first love ever was basketball. but I still was being pulled in different directions. And this one incident changed my life forever. I was in the 11th grade in high school.
What grade?
And I was telling my dad, 11.
11.
I was a junior in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And but I was already getting college scholarship offers. You know, different scouts was coming down. You know, nothing was in writing. They would just say, "Hey, look, we watching you. You got to finish one more year, and we're going to make an offer to you from the junior colleges to help me boost up my grades so I can get make the next step to a major college, to even outright major college, Division I." And I remember my dad came down and he went to this club called Paul's Playhouse. So I go over there to meet him because I'm trying to tell him, you know, look, man, because he told me if I ever needed anything, I went over there and I wanted to look good on the college campus, but I had to have a vehicle. So I'm asking him to buy me a car, well, a truck, actually. I wanted a Mazda truck at the time. And I'm telling him this. I'm telling him, look, man, you know, I'm going to college. And he says, son, you know, there's only one person out of every 10 million that makes it to the NBA. I'm like, I mean, I don't care about statistics at this time, man. I just know, look, I know my potential. I felt my potential. I was doing some amazing things that you couldn't script. And I just felt like nobody was better than me, period. I don't care who you were. So that what he was putting out didn't mean nothing to me. And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, cool, but I still would like for you to help me get a, you know, Mazda truck. So he said, you want me to help you get a truck? I said, yeah. He said, come with me outside. And we went outside, and he had a gray two-tone Lincoln Continental, the same year and make, with the burgundy rag top, with the Trues and Vogue rims and tires, and this was the first time I've seen buttons, with coded buttons on the door where you press a code and the doors open. Huh. And he pressed this code, and the trunk popped up. And there's a couple of Nike shoe boxes in the trunk. He grabs a box, and he reaches out, and he pulls this big old Ziploc bag full of something. All I remember, it was nighttime. It was about 7 o'clock at night, but it was dark at this time, and they shine, they glisten. It was like I had never seen shit like this before. I don't even know what it is. And he says, hey, bring me $7,500, and you keep $3,500. And I was like, oh, okay. And that was it. He closed the trunk and walked away.
And what year was this?
89. 89. A year later.
Oh, okay, so you were 15 years old.
Yeah, 15.
Okay.
Right about 15.
Okay.
And so when he does this, it's kind of like I ran back in the house in my mom's house, because my mom's house was across the street from Paul's Playhouse, the club. And I remember running into my bedroom and emptying the contents, and I'm examining each one of these little crystal-looking rocks carefully. And I remember how warm it felt against my fingers. And I don't know what this is, man. And I've never been around nothing like that. I never smoked weed, never smoked a joint a day in my life. But I knew some friends who was on the street corners. And all I wanted to do now was to show my dad that I could be responsible, make his money, and then, you know, see how I can get my truck. So I go to these friends, I give them the drugs, and I say, look, I want y'all to sell it, but all y'all need to do is bring me back $7,500. Now, understand what I'm saying. I was willing not to make one penny off of this. And they was like, man, where did you get this shit from, man? Man, they could make a lot of money. I said, well, I don't care what y'all make, just bring me back $7,500. And the next day, they brought me back $7,500. And I gave...
Hold up. It just broke up. Okay, hold on.
And
you gave the last. It said you gave. Can you hear me?
Oh, I gave.
Yeah.
I gave the drugs to my friends.
Right.
For them to sell.
Right.
Because I didn't know what to do, and I didn't care what they made. All I told them was bring me back $7,500. That's it.
Yep.
And they brought that back to me the next day.
Mm-hmm.
I paid my dad his money. He was impressed because I think he knew that I had no idea what the fuck I was doing. He knew I had no idea what this was. So he was really intrigued. Looking back, I can tell he was intrigued on how did I sell this within less than 24 hours, right? So when he went back to Houston, he came back 3 days later, and he gave me the same amount again. Bring him back 75, I keep 35. And I did the same thing with my friends. I gave them the drugs, let them sell it, but this time I watched who they were selling it to. And so I gave my dad his money, and this time I took the Greyhound bus. And this will go on for the next 3 years. I was making 2 to 3 trips a week on the Greyhound bus, or sometimes he would come down and we would exchange like that. I used Western Union to wire his money, to make sure once I had all his money, I walked through Western Union. And that's how it went. Basketball became secondary to this. Also, that in my mind, this was the way for me to have a father-son relationship that I thought I had wanted.
Wow. And so that's an interesting relationship with your dad. Now, is he still alive?
No, he died. He died last September. His health he had been on dialysis for a couple of years, and so his health was bad. But I tell you something about, I know people talking for a little bit, but I would say my dad never told me stuff. And I'm not getting into the
hold on. You just went like echoey. Is your mic far away? Or anything?
I'm right here. You can hear me now?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay. No, I was going to say that I know I'm leapfrogging a little bit, but I just want to make this one comment about that, right? Because I told this story hundreds of times to different pen pals through the last 26 years when people start investing in me emotionally. It is common for them to say, well, what about your family? Mm-hmm. And I've always been transparent, right? It is what it is. No need for me to sit here and lie. That's not who I am. So, and everybody demonized my dad. And hey, maybe there is justification in that, but I will tell you this, and I'm going to listen for a while, because my dad never told me he loved me when I was growing up. And this case that I'm on, there was two, I'm sure we'll get into it. Yeah, I know. In fact, I know we will. But there was 2 instances where I could have beat this case had I turned my dad in. This how crazy this shit is, right? And I didn't. But in 2019, when an private investigator by the name of Kimberly Carter came into my life and started finding all this evidence about my case, she started posting it on the internet. At this point, I have no relationship with my father's side of the family. Betrayal, again, they all turned their back on me. And I remember he asked to come visit me. And I took him off my visitation list for years because I had moved on. It was nothing more than I could say. It was nothing more he could say. But in 2019, I put him back on my visitation list. The investigator, she was in contact with him, and she was telling me, sharing bits and pieces of their conversation. So when I put him on a visitation, if he comes up here, now this time his health is bad. He was a fraction of the man that I once knew and admired to a degree. But before the visit was over, he he had a tear in his eye, man, and he said, son, I did not know that this was actually a wrong conviction. He said all these years, everybody had told him that I was guilty of this, and everybody put it in his head, and he said, I wish I could have helped you financially to get you a lawyer from the beginning when I had the means to do so. And I'm trying to brush it away. You know, I'm like, man, don't worry about that, woo, woo, because I could see this is going to be an emotional conversation, and we only got like 10 minutes left for visit time, right? So, and he said, son, no, he said, I need to say something to you, son. He said, man, I love you, man. And even though he said it, and I immediately tried to brush it off or deflect it, that shit touched my heart, man, because I waited all these years just for him to say that, right?
Wow.
And maybe to some people who hear this story, maybe that don't mean shit, right? But the way I've grown, because I am on death row, Texas death row, and you cannot imagine the mental anguish that everybody goes through here. But to have somebody say, hey, I admit I was wrong, that has value to me. We can't change the past. You know, we can only deal with what's in the present and move forward. But I will always have respect for any man, woman, child who can admit that they were wrong.
Wow. Okay, well, these minutes go really fast, my brother. With what we have left here, what kind of wisdom can you leave the people with? What can you make the world a better place by teaching them something that you've learned throughout your years, or something great that you can bestow upon us?
You know, man, there's an old Chinese fortune cookie that everybody keeps spreading around talking about. You know, they take two to tango, and you know, people interpret that to mean many, many different things. I always tell everybody, man, issues can be resolved if you look inside yourself to see what it was that you doing wrong or displeasing that makes you angry at the next person that you feel have wronged you or displeased you. And because sometimes I had this conversation, the reason why I bring this up is because I had this conversation with somebody earlier today. Sometimes, bro, the problem ain't everybody. Sometimes it could be you. And that's why I want to leave the world, especially America, man, because we are so quick to blame others. We are so quick to point fingers. We are so quick to demonize other people. But let's just try to understand what is it we're dealing with internally so we can understand other people's, what they're dealing with. And that's what I want to leave with everybody with today.
Beautiful.
I want to thank you, brother, for this opportunity to touch the world, and hopefully I'm like Jesus right now, man. So if I can just touch one, then I feel like I've done my job.
Yep. Okay, everybody, thank you very much for joining this podcast. This is Charles Mamou Jr., and this is Behind the Bars.